Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 3 and all material is teaching reading. The first presentation will be taken by me, and please go to the next slide. Research reading in second language. By the 1970 centuries, researchers on reading when the first language had been flourishing for a couple of decades as a solution were being sought to why some children were not successfully learning to read, but research on reading in second language was almost non-existent. Then, with a good man in 1970, the seminal article, Reading Psycholinguistic Quizzing Games and Other Subsequent Work, second language specialists began to tackle the unique issue and question facing second language reading pedagogy. Please go to the next slide. So there are some research on reading in second language. The first one is bottom up and bottom down processing. Uh, Bottom up and bottom down processing is the it's research led by Gottmans in 1970. The distinction between bottom up and bottom down processing become a cornerstone of readings in methodology for years to come. In bottom up processing, readers must first recognize multiplicity of linguistic signals like letter, morphemes, syllables, word, phrase, grammatical cues, discourse marker, and etc. And use their linguistic data to processing the mechanism for improve to some sort of order on these signals. The data difference operation obviously require a sophisticated knowledge of the language itself. From among all the perceived data, the reader selects the signal that makes some sense that coherence the coherence that means. The second one is schema theory and background knowledge. Uh, uh, how do the readers construct the meaning? How do they decide what to hold on to, and having made the decision, how they infer over the message? These are some sort of question addressing by what has come to know as a schema theory. The how of which is that a text does not by itself carrying meanings. Uh, the readers bring information, knowledge, emotion, experience, and culture that is schemata. To printed words, schema theory, it's not new construct. It's already construct for a decades by Kirks and Skibberton. The next one, it's teaching strategic reading. One of the questions that have been asked about teaching reading has been the extent of which learner will learn to read better in places where atmosphere of enriched surroundings that in instruction sequence of direct attentions to the strategies of efficient reading. Most expert in reading research side with the latter uh, and cites research in support of their conclusions. A viable theory is instructed second language in acquisition can hardly be suitable without a solid component of strategic competence. the the next one is extensive reading. Uh, on the other hand, there are places for extensive reading of longer texts which little or no conscious strategic inversion. Researchers agree that, at least for academic purpose, extensive reading is a key for a student to gain in reading ability, reading ability, linguistic competence, vocabulary, spelling, and writing. Found that found that reading for pleasure and reading without looking up all the unknown words were both highly correlates with the overall language proficiency. And number five is reading rate, fluency, and automaticity. From parallel the research on the language scale, fluency or reading rate has drawn the attention of some research in the first language reading. The fluency and reading rate have been long concerns, and recently more research has been appeared supporting the essential role of fluency and reading rate in second language learning. Further notes that fluency is a combination of both reading rate and reading comprehension. It goes on suggests strategies of scanning, predicting, and identifying meaning its approach to increase fluency, or what might also be described as automaticity. And number six is focus on vocabulary. This recent year, there has been a resurgence of interest the role of vocabulary knowledge and on the acquisition of reading skills, with finding that supporting strong relationship between vocabulary knowledge and letter reading ability. And number seven is the role of affect and culture. It's readily apparent from a cursor survey of search on second language acquisition that effectively factor play major role in ultimate success. Just as a language ego, self extend empathy and motivation undergrade the acquisition of spoken discourse reading is subject to vocabulary with effective domain. The love of reading has propelled many of learners to successfully acquisition acquisition of reading skills. Instruction has been found to be effective when students have Eastern in hike. The autonomy gained through the learner of reading strategy has been shown to be powerful motivator. Not to mention the effective power of reading itself. Similarly, culture play an active role in motivating and rewarding people for literacy. We cannot simply assume that cognitive factor alone will account for the eventual success of second language reader. And for number eight, or the last one, is second language literary. As the second language material and method continue to apply both bottom-up and top-down models of reading to program and circular and particularly challenging focus of effort for researcher and teacher has been literally level teaching of adult. A significant number of immigrants arriving in various non-native countries and culture are non-literate in their native language, posing special issue in teaching of a second language, when are sometimes refers to a skill-based bottom-up and strategies-based top-down approach are both used in adult literacy training. For more information of this specialized field, a particular good reference is either from 2014 synopsis of research and practice in reading literacy. Uh, Aside from five major issues touched on above, a multiple of other topics are great for current research meals is the role of cognition in reading, the role of automaticity in word recognition, reading of social cultural practice, the effective teaching technique effective technique for activating schemata, relationship of reading to writing. Yeah, please go to the next. Right, thank you. There is a genre in written language and the genre for written language is non-fiction. Non-fiction is like reports, editorial, essay, article, reference, or dictionary, and etc. There is a fiction. The fiction is like a novel, short stories, jokes, drama, or poetry. The next one is a letter. It's like for personal and sometimes for business. Next is electronics. It's like email, tweets, or blog posts. Next is there are greeting card. Uh, there are also diaries or journals, memo, message, announcement, newspaper like journalist report, academic writing, ROM of application, questionnaires, direction, labels, signs, receipts, bills, maps, manuals, menus, schedules, advertisement, like commercial or personal, invitation, directories, and comics or cartoon. And I think that's all from me. Can we go to the next slide? And for the next slide, it will be presented by Aftsal. Aftsal, time is yours.
Thanks, Allam. Characteristic of written language. There are quite a number of silent and relevant differences between spoken and written language. Students already literate in their native language will, of course, be familiar with the broad basic characteristic of written language. However, some characteristic of English writing, especially certain rhetorical confession, may be so different from the students' native language that reading efforts are blocked. The characteristic list below will also be of some help for you in doing the following. Diagnosing certain reading difficulties arising from the idiosyncrasies of written language, pointing your techniques toward specific objective, and reminding students of some of the advantage of written language over spoken. Characteristic of written language. Permanence. Spoken language is fleeting. Once you speak a sentence, it vanishes unless there is a tape recorder around. The hearer, therefore, is called upon to make immediate perception and immediate storage. Written language is permanent, or as permanent as a paper and computer files are, and therefore the reader has an opportunity to return again and again, if necessary, to a word or phrase or sentence, or even a whole text. Processing time. A corollary to the above is the processing time that the reader gains. Many readings contexts allow readers to read at their own rate, especially reading for pleasure, armchair book reading, newspaper reading. They are forced into following the rate of delivery, as in spoken language, and so somewhat slower readers are not always at disadvantage, especially when they are in complete control of the amount of time needed to read a text. Distance. The written word allows message to be sent across two dimensions, physical distance and temporal distance. The pedagogical significance of this fact centered on interpretation. The task of the reader is to interpret language that was written in some other place at some other time with only the written word themselves as contextual clues. Orthography. In spoken language, most languages have phonimes, stress, rhythm, juncture, intonation, pause, volume, voice quality settings, and nonverbal cues, all of which enhance the message. In writing, we have graphemes. That's it. Yes, sometimes punctuation, picture, graphic, or charts lend a helping hand. And yes, a writer can describe the aforementioned phonological cues, as in with loud, rasping runs, punctuated with frost of pain. He slowly dragged himself out of the line of enemy fire. Complexity. Writing and speech represent different models of complexity, and the most salient difference is in the nature of clauses. Spoken language tends to have shorter clauses connected by more coordinate conjunction, while writing has longer clauses and more subordination. The shorter clauses are often a factor of the redundancy we build into speech, repeating subject and verb for clarity. Vocabulary. It is true the written English typically utilizes a greater variety of lexical items than spoken conventional English in our everyday give and take with family, friends, and colleagues. Vocabulary is limited because writing allows the reader more processing time. Because of desire to be precise in writing and simply because of the formal convention of writing. C7 below. Low frequency words often appear. Such words can present stumbling blocks to learners. Formality. Writing is quite frequently more formal than speech. What do we mean by that? Formality refers to prescribed forms that certainly written message must adhere to. The reason that you can both recognize a meaning and decide what to add fairly quickly is the menus convert to certain conversion. Things are categorized: appetizer, salads, interest, dessert, in logical order and subcategorized. All seafood dishes are listed together. Exotic or creative names of four dishes are usually defined. Prices are given for each item. And the menu isn't so long that it overwhelms you. Micro and macro skill for reading comprehension. Micro skill discriminate among the distinctive graphemes and orthographic patterns of English. Retain chunks of language of different lengths and short-term memory. Comprehend written language at an efficient rate of speed to suit the purpose. Recognize a core of words, then interpret word order patterns and their significance. Recognize grammatical word classes, nouns, verbs, system, tense, agreement, pluralization, patterns, prose, and elliptical forms. Recognize that a particular meaning may be expressed in the different grammatical forms. Macro skills recognize cohesive device in written discourse and their role in signaling the relationship between and among clauses. Recognize the rhetorical forms of written discourse and their significance of interpretation. Recognize the communicative function of written text according to form and purpose. Infer context that is not explicit by using background knowledge. Infer links and connection between even ideas, deduce causes and effects, and detect such relation as main idea, supporting idea, new information, given information, generalization, and exemplification. Distinguish between literal and implied meanings. Detect culturally as specific reference and interpret them in a context of appropriate cultural schemata. Develop and use a battery of reading the strategies such as scanning and skimming, detecting discourse markers, guessing the meaning of words from context, and activating schemata for the interpretation of text. And I think that's all from my material, and the material will be explained by Solano.
Okay, thank you, Aftsal. Um, Next material will explained by me. Strategies for reading comprehension. One, identify the purpose in reading. Uh, Efficient reading consists of clearly identifying the purpose of reading something. By doing so, you know what you're looking for and can weed out potential distracting information. Whenever you are teaching a reading technique, make sure students know their purpose in reading something. Um, Number two, in the early stage of learning, number two, use uh, graphemic rules and pattern to aid in bottom-up decoding. In the early stage of learning English, one of the difficulties faced by studying is learning to read is to make a correspondence or difference between spoken and written English. In most cases, students are familiar with spoken and writing English. In most cases, students are familiar with spoken language but have difficulty learning English spelling conversation. To solve this problem, we can provide hints and explanation about certain rules and particulars of English orthography. Uh, this and many other phonic approach to reading have proven useful for early level learners and are especially useful for teaching non-literal literate children and adults. And number three, use efficient silent reading technique for improving fluency. Uh, it is good for intermediate and advanced students. We help them improve their reading speed and comprehension efficiency by teaching them some reading rules by heart. One, you don't need to pronounce each word to yourself. Uh, and two, trying to usually perceive more than one word at a time, preferably phrase. And three, unless a word is absolutely crucial to global understanding, skip over it and try to inform its meaning for its context. If student can read 250 to 300 words per minute, further attention to speed may not be necessary. Number four, skill the text for main ideas. Skimming consists of quickly running one's eye across a whole text, such as an essay, article, or chapter for its gist. Skimming given readers the advantage of being able to predict the purpose of the passage, the main topic or message, and possibly some of developing or supporting ideas. Uh, this gives them a head uh, start as they embark on more focused reading. You can train students to skim passage by giving them, say, 30 seconds to look through a few page of material, close their books, and then tell you when they learn. Number five, uh, scanning. Sorry. Number five, scan the text for specific information. Scanning exercise might ask students to look for name or date, to find a definition of a key concept, or to list a certain number of supporting details. The purpose of scanning is to extract specific information without reading through the whole text. For academic English, scanning is absolutely essential. In vocational or general English, scanning is important in dealing with genres like schedules, manual, or forms. Next, number six, use semantic mapping or clustering. Making such semantic map can be done individually, but they make for a productive group work technique as students collectively induce order and hierarchy to a passage. Number seven, yes, when you are uncertain, learners can use guessing to their advantage to guess the meaning of words, guess the grammatical relationship, like a pronoun reference, guess a discourse relationship, and etc. You can help learners to become accurate viewers by encouraging them to use effective compensation stages in which they fill gaps in their competence by intelligent attempts to use whatever clues are available to them. Language-based clues include word analysis, word association, and textual structure. Non-linguistic clues come from context, situation, and other schemata. Number eight, analyze fake vocabulary. Uh, One way for learners to make a guessing play off and they don't immediately recognize a word is not analyze it in terms of what they know about it. Several techniques are useful there, like first look prefix like co, intern, on, and extra, etc. That may give clues, and two look their suffix like blution, uh, blah blah blah, thief, the Ellie, and etc. That may indicate what part of speech it is. Number three, look for roots that are familiar, like interfering may be a word a student doesn't know, but recognizing that the root then comes from Latin, like to come, and would yield the meaning, for example, to come in between. Next, number four, look for grammatical context that may signal information. And the last one is look at the semantic context or topic for clues. And next, strategy for reading comprehension number nine is uh, distinguishing between literal and implied meaning. This requires the application of sophisticated top-down processing skill. The fact that not all language can be interpreted appropriate by attending to its literal synthetic surface structure makes special demands on readers. Implied meaning usually has to be derived from processing pragmatic information, as the following example. One, Bill walked into the freezing classroom and immediately noticed Bob sitting by open window with a heavy uh, sweatshirt on. Brr, he exclaimed simultaneously, eyeing Bob and the open windows. It's your cold in the here, Bob. Bob glanced up from his book and uh, growled, all right, I'll close the window. And example number two, the policeman held up his hand and stopped the car. And last example, Mary heard the ice cream man coming down the street. She remembered her birthday money and rushed into the house. Next, the last number 10, capitalize on discourse makers to process relationship. Many discourse makers in English signal relationship among ideas as expressed through phrase, clause, and sentence. A clear comprehension of such markers can greatly enhance a learner's reading efficiency. Okay, next, uh, type of classroom reading performance: oral and silent reading. Occasionally, you will have reason to ask students to read orally at the beginning and intermediate level. Oral reading provides some advantage as well as disadvantage. Consider the following. Uh, Advantage: oral reading serves an evaluated check on bottom-up processing skill. Uh, and next, it doubles as a pronunciation check. And last one is it adds some extra student participation if you want to highlight a certain short segment of a reading passage. And for the disadvantage is first, oral reading is not very authentic language activity. Uh, Second, while one student is reading, others can easily lose attention, or if they are reading in turn, be silently uh, rehearsing the next paragraph. And the third is might have the outward appearance of student participation when its reality is mere recitation. Intensive and extensive reading. Uh, for intensive reading, silent reading may be subcategorized into intensive and extensive reading. Intensive reading, analogous to intensive listening, is usually a classroom-oriented activity in which students focus on linguistic or semantic detail of passage. Intensive reading often calls students' attention to grammatical form, discourse makers, and other surface structure detail for the purpose of understanding literal meaning, implication, rhetorical, relationship, and the like. And next is extensive reading. Extensive reading is carried out to achieve a general understanding of usually somewhat longer text. For example, books, long article, and essay. Most, most extensive reading is performed outside the class time. Personal reading is often extensive. Technical, scientific, and personal reading can under certain special circumstance be extensive when one is striving for global or regional meaning from longer passage.
And the next material will be explained by me. The principle for teaching and reading skills. There are 8 principles for teaching reading skills. The first one is in an integrated course include a focus on reading skills. Second language learners who are literate in their own language are sometimes left to their own device when it comes to learning reading skills. It's easy for teachers to assume that our student will learn good reading simply by absorption through generous offering of both intensive and extensive reading opportunities. In reality, there is much to be gained by a strategic focus on reading skill within lessons that cover other skills. And the second one is offering reading on relevant, interesting, motivating topics. What do you think makes for interesting and relevant reading for your students? Of the long list of texts at the beginning of this chapter, how many will your student encounter in real life? Use those texts. What are your student goals in the learning to read English? Focus on those goals. Choose material that is relevant to the goals. The third one is balancing authenticity and readability in choosing text. By now, the importance of authentic language should be more than clear, but in teaching reading, one issue that has invited some controversy is advisability of what are called simplified texts, in which an otherwise authentic text is edited to keep language within the proficiency level of a set of students. In order for you to make a decision on this issue, it is important to distinguish between simple text and simplified text, and to understand source of complexity in reading material. The fourth one is encourage the development of reading strategy, and the fifth one is include both bottom-up and top-down technique. In our quest for communicative, authentic language activity in the classroom, we sometimes forget that learners can indeed benefit from studying the fundamentals. Make sure that you give enough classroom time to focusing on the building blocks of written language, geared appropriately for each level. The sixth one is follow the QER sequence. One effective series of procedure for approaching a reading text has come to be labeled by the SQ3R technique, a process consisting of the following 5 steps. The first one is survey, and they skim the text for an overview of main idea, and then question. The reader asks question about what he or she wishes to get out of the text. The next one is read. Read the text while looking for answer to the previously formulated question, and then recite. Reprocess the salient points of the text through oral or written language. And the last one is review. Assess the importance of what one has just read and incorporate it into a long-term association. The seventh one is design pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading phases. And the last one is building ongoing informal assessment into your technique. Because reading is listening comprehension is totally inobservable, we have to infer comprehension from other behavior. It is as important in reading as it is in listening to be able to accurately assess students' comprehension and development of skills. Assessing reading. The class principle of classroom assessment apply to your attempts to assess reading comprehension. To be specific about which micro or macro skills you are assessing, identify the genre of written communication that is being evaluated, and choose carefully among the range of possibilities from simply perceiving letters or words all the way to extensive reading. In your efforts to design tests at any one of combination of this level and categories, consider the following taxonomy of tasks from Brown and Abiwikrama in 2010. These are not meant to be exhaustive, but rather to provide an overview of some possibilities. Next. The first one is perceptive reading, recognition of symbols, letters, and words. It is reading aloud, copying, multiple choice, recognition, and picture good identification. The second one is selective reading, focus on morphology, grammar, and lexicon. It is multiple choice, grammar or vocabulary task, contextualist multiple choice, sentence level cloze test, matching test, grammar and or vocabulary editing task, picture quote task, and gap filling task. The third one is interactive reading. It is discourse level closed task, reading comprehension question, short answer response to reading, discourse editing task, scanning, reordering sequence of sentence, responding to charts, maps, graphs, and diagrams. And the last one is extensive reading. It is skimming, summarizing, responding to reading through short essays, note-taking, marginal notes, or highlighting, and the last one is outlining. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I think it's all from us, from group 3, and thank you for your attention. And from us, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.